Our story begins in the Jedi Council chambers as the Jedi Council discover that the clone army was created by the Sith. It goes similarly to how it does in the original timeline. However, once Anakin and Obi-Wan end their hologram call, Obi-Wan remembers Anakin's recent report about fives and the inhibitor chips, and reports this to the Council in a separate meeting. Mace Windu then proposes a plan that was controversial, where the Council would secretly order a mass removal of the inhibitor chips, and give the clones the choice to remove them. Only the Council would know of this plan, and the clones would be instructed to keep it quiet as well. Obi-Wan was immediately hesitant, as this meant keeping yet another secret from Anakin, his brother. However, the Council unanimously approves of the plan, and the mass removal begins in secret. Besides months of removing the inhibitor chips in secret, everything else goes according to the original timeline up until Palpatine says the words,
"Execute Order 66.
However, this time, while quite a few clones still execute their Jedi commanders, such as Ki-Adi-Mundi, Depa Billaba, Jaro Tapal, and Luminara Unduli, many of the clones, because they have removed their inhibitor chips, disobey Palpatine's orders, resulting in the failure of the plan of the Sith. On Felucia, Aayla Secura was informed of what had happened as Commander Bly and his clone legion dropped their weapons after receiving the orders. On Utapau, Obi-Wan gets a communication from Cody informing him of Palpatine's betrayal. Obi-Wan orders Cody to buy him some time as he quietly steps away from the battle in order to contact the Jedi Council frequency. On Kashyyyk, Yoda is pulled aside by Commander Gree as he is also informed of what happened. Yoda also informs the commander and the Wookiees that he would be stepping away to contact the Council. On Cato Nemoidia, Plo Koon is also informed of the situation, and Plo lands his ship so as to contact the Council. On the Venator, Rex, this time having removed his inhibitor chip, tells Ahsoka what had happened. Ahsoka instantly feels for Anakin in the Force, but she feels a dark void where Anakin used to be. She fears the worst, as she then orders Rex to change their course for the planet of Naboo, feeling that Padme would be willing to help. Rex obliges her, and they immediately head for Naboo after changing course. On Coruscant, Anakin meets with the 501st to lead the attack on the Jedi Temple. However, the clones resist Anakin's orders, and a fight breaks out where Anakin kills many of his men, including Oppo. Sidious, having sensed that his plans had failed, immediately senses that Anakin was in trouble, and arrives just in time to assist him against the 501st. Sidious tells Anakin that their plan had failed, and that for now they have to immediately leave the planet. Anakin doesn't like the idea, as Padme was still on the planet, but he complies when Palpatine tells him that they can't help Padme if they're dead. And Darth Sidious and Darth Vader ultimately leave Coruscant. The Council, after meeting over hologram, decide to meet on the world of Tython and to instruct the rest of the survivors to meet there as well. They would be leaving Coruscant after informing the Senate of Palpatine's betrayal. Obi-Wan, fearing for Anakin, would return to Coruscant to check up on both him and Padme. When he got there, however, he would learn from a member of the 501st that Anakin had tried to lead them to attack the temple, but that he had escaped with the hooded man. Obi-Wan would look at the security footage, and he would be even more shocked than he was in the original timeline, as he recognized the voice of the man in the hood to be that of Palpatine, and Obi-Wan knew that he had to contact Padme immediately and get her to safety. So, Obi-Wan would go to Padme's apartment, and this time, Padme, having not seen Anakin since before he went to the Jedi Temple that morning, believed Obi-Wan. And, when her water breaks due to the stress of it all, she agreed to go with him to Polis Massa, where she would give birth to Luke and Leia and survive the process. Obi-Wan would contact Yoda informing him of the situation, and Yoda would come as quickly as he could. The Council would then meet again in order to discuss the fate of the Skywalker twins. They would again propose to separate the twins, but Padme is vehemently against this idea. However, Obi-Wan sees eye to eye with the Council and sees that it could be the only way that the children would be safe, and Padme calms down, but she demands to keep one child to take with her into hiding. The Jedi agree, and Obi-Wan ultimately decides to take Luke and train him in the ways of the Force, while Padme keeps Leia and takes her into hiding. Everyone agrees, and everyone parts ways. Obi-Wan, upon arriving on Tython with Luke, hears the boy cry and instantly tends to him. Obi-Wan then promises the young boy that he would become a great Jedi like his father before him. Sometime later, Luke would be placed in Obi-Wan's quarters on Tython upon his request. Yoda accepted this request himself for 2 reasons. The first reason being that he had just felt Padme's death in the Force, and that this boy was now the key, the only hope to defeating the Sith. And the second reason, and possibly just as important, was that Yoda knew how much Anakin meant to Obi-Wan, and knew that Obi-Wan had been heartbroken by Anakin's fall to the dark side. Yoda knew that Obi-Wan wanted to honor his fallen friend, his fallen brother, by training his son in the ways of the Force, in the way that Anakin should have been trained. So, Obi-Wan and Luke cry together as Obi-Wan tends to Luke in his quarters. Meanwhile, Sidious and Vader would land on the planet Mustafar, and they do not kill the Separatists as Order 66 had failed, and they would have to hide here for the time being. But they order all remaining battle droids to prepare for battle for when the time came to take the galaxy by force. Vader, due to his fear of losing Padme, is conflicted, but Sidious chokes Vader while also hitting him with Force lightning as he puts his apprentice in his place. And they begin Vader's training in the dark side of the Force, as he is then taught how to bleed his Kyber crystal. Padme would ultimately decide to take Leia with 2 Jedi Guardians to hide out in a house on the countryside of Naboo, and Ahsoka and Rex would arrive shortly after Padme and Leia got there, finding them. And Padme tells both Ahsoka and Rex the truth about Anakin's fall. Rex was simply too shocked to speak at this revelation, and Ahsoka began to sob, lamenting that she should have told Yoda about Maul's visions, because she now knew that Maul's visions were ultimately correct. Despite this, Ahsoka and Rex volunteer to help protect, mentor, and raise Leia. Ahsoka even volunteers to train Leia in the ways of the Force herself when the young girl was old enough. Several peaceful months passed by. By this point, everyone from the 501st who went with Ahsoka to Mandalore was on Naboo, with Padme, Leia, Ahsoka, and Rex, with Maul still imprisoned in the Mandalorian sarcophagus. However, one of Padme's protectors was secretly an Inquisitor. The 7th sister would report to Darth Sidious that Padme, Ahsoka, Rex, and Maul were on Naboo. Palpatine, having sensed that Padme needed to be killed in order to keep Anakin in the dark side, immediately leaves for Naboo with all of the Inquisitors and many battle droids to go with him. However, Vader, having trained for weeks under Sidious and having learned everything that Sidious knows through Sidious's teachings and his own research, senses that something is up, and he masks his presence in the Force as he secretly gets on Palpatine's ship. The ship leaves for Naboo with the rest of the fleet, and when it lands, the Jedi Protectors minus Ahsoka would immediately ignite their lightsabers, but one of them, being the 7th sister, would take the Jedi Baylan Skoll by surprise, as he yells for Padme to take her child and run. Padme leaves the house from the back door, taking Leia and a blaster with her, as well as Ahsoka and Rex, as the combined might of Sidious and the 7th sister would be too much for Baylan, and he dies. The fleet of battle droids and Inquisitors attack the 501st troopers, and many of them are ultimately cut down. Sidious, seeing Padme go out the door, runs to her location instantly after Baylan's death, and Padme fires 2 blasts at the former Chancellor, as does Rex. But they are deflected by his lightsaber as Ahsoka then rushes him. She puts up a valiant effort, but Sidious then cuts her down, killing her by stabbing her in the heart. Sidious then yanks Rex and Padme's blasters away with the Force, and uses the Force to choke Rex and slowly rip Leia from Padme's arms. Padme cries in terror, and Rex struggles to break free before Sidious takes Leia, telling Padme that her child would serve the Sith well, before ultimately breaking Rex's neck and cutting Padme down, killing them both in one fell swoop as Vader, still aboard Sidious's ship, watched in horror. Sidious then finds Maul still aboard the Venator that Ahsoka and Rex had arrived on, and Sidious chokes Maul with the Force as he then stabs him in the heart with his lightsaber, killing him. It was then, as Vader was hiding aboard Sidious's ship, that he knew that Sidious had manipulated him and that Sidious should not be the Sith Master. It was at that moment that Darth Vader, who was still hiding in Palpatine's ship, decided that whenever they returned to Mustafar, he would challenge Sidious in front of all of his allies and take the title of Sith Master for himself. He would kill Sidious for what he had done to his wife, for attempting to take his child, whom he immediately sensed that it was a girl named Leia, and he would make the galaxy suffer for Padme's death. Vader would stay hidden during the entire trip to Mustafar, and when Sidious returned to the Separatist leaders with Leia crying in his arms, he put her down and attempted to use the Force to enslave her mind to him. However, before Sidious could even begin to attempt this, he was suddenly pushed backwards by use of the Force, and Sidious hit the wall so hard that it would have killed him right then and there had he not been as powerful as he was. Sidious looked to see who did it, and his eyes went wide with horror as Vader, having sensed what Sidious was about to do and still using the Force to hold him against the wall, furiously screams at his master to stay away from his daughter. The Separatist leaders are shocked as this is happening, and Sidious, knowing that he had just lost the support of the Separatists, attempts to shock Vader with his Force Lightning, but Vader conjures Force Lightning of his own and shocks Sidious briefly before releasing him. Both Vader and Sidious ignite their lightsabers, and an epic, ferocious duel begins between the two Sith Lords. It is similar to Anakin's fight with Obi-Wan in the original timeline, except this time, Vader had much more time in the dark side, and he knew not to underestimate Sidious's power. Sidious, at one point, attempts to throw lava at Vader, but Vader, sensing the danger, blocks it with a nearby boulder and jumps over it as Sidious attempted to throw Vader into the lava. Vader, however, acts quicker and sends Sidious backwards before he can do so. Darth Vader, utterly furious at Sidious for what he had done to him and to his wife, uses the Force to run towards Sidious at lightning speed as he tries to get up. However, Vader uses the ability of Force Scream as Sidious does so, and Sidious is knocked back to the ground as Vader, as quick as a flash, plunged his blood-red lightsaber into the back of Sidious's skull. Sidious dies instantly with a horrified look on his face as Darth Vader, the chosen one of the Jedi and now the most powerful Sith Lord who had ever lived, ascended to Dark Lord of the Sith. Vader throws Sidious's body into the lava, then returns to the Separatist leaders and informs them that Palpatine is dead. However, he tells them that Palpatine's death would be kept secret. No one outside of this room is to know of the death of Palpatine, Vader says, before then exclaiming that the Separatists would be reorganized into an empire under his control and that of his daughter Leia. The Separatist leaders, knowing more about politics than Vader did, would help him to rule this empire. Emperor Vader would rule similarly to how Kylo Ren ruled the First Order after the death of Snoke in the sequel trilogy. However, he would rule with more of an iron fist. Vader decreed that Newt Gunray would be executed instantly by Vader for the role he played in the assassination attempts on Padme. Gunray would instantly beg for mercy, saying that Sidious promised him prosperity. However, Vader retorts by saying that Sidious made that promise, while Vader, on the other hand, had promised him no such thing. And Gunray is cut down without further argument. None of the Separatist leaders argue with this, and they begin to prepare all battle droids for war with the Republic. The Clone Wars were over, but a new war would begin. This was the beginning of the Galactic Civil War, with the newly formed Empire with battle droids and actual citizens fitted as stormtroopers against the Republic. The Republic had betrayed Vader. They had betrayed his family, and for this, the Republic would crumble under Vader's fist before the entire galaxy would bow before him. Our story continues 19 years later. While the Republic and Separatist Empire were still engaged in the Galactic Civil War, some citizens decided to create their own armies to aid the Jedi in their quest to defeat the Empire. The Jedi have been searching for Darth Sidious, aka Palpatine, for many years now, ever since informing the Senate of his betrayal. The Jedi would even decide to separate from the Republic to not only focus on this mission, but to make the Jedi Order into something better. However, ever since Order 66 failed, they had found absolutely nothing on Palpatine. What the Jedi didn't know, though, was that Palpatine was long dead, and that a new Emperor, Darth Vader, had taken over the Separatist Empire long ago. Darth Vader would have led many battles against the Republic and would go against many Jedi who attempted to assist them. Whenever Vader went into battle, he left no survivors, showing no mercy to anyone who dared cross his path. Darth Vader no longer had any mercy towards anyone, as Anakin Skywalker was now gone for good, and any mercy that Vader had left died with Padme on the day that Sidious took her from him. As such, early into his reign, Vader would brutally kill all of the Inquisitors for their role in Padme's death, and the Inquisitors would ultimately die out. Vader would train two acolytes in the dark side of the Force who were more powerful than any of the Inquisitors, Galen Merrick and Ezra Bridger, but neither one of them would ever be his true apprentice, as Leia had already been chosen for the role due to the fact that she was also Vader's daughter. All three of Vader's acolytes would be trained for years before entering the battlefield, and they would all enter the battlefield at 16 years old, dominating each battle they entered and winning many times. Leia, at 19 years old, would go up against Obi-Wan on the planet Moraband when he was alone, looking for anything on Palpatine, and Obi-Wan would ultimately escape after realizing who this girl was. After Obi-Wan returns to Tython, Luke Skywalker, having been trained by Obi-Wan since birth, is named a Jedi Knight after a successful solo mission against the Separatist Empire on his father's homeworld of Tatooine. Luke had been introduced to Owen and Beru at a young age and would be given time to spend with his family. The reason for this was because Obi-Wan realized that one of the reasons that Anakin fell to the dark side was because he was denied any connection to his loved ones. Anakin was never allowed to have attachments, and so, after some instruction from Yoda in the early days of Luke's life, Qui-Gon's Force Ghost would help Obi-Wan to mentor and train Luke in the way that Obi-Wan should have trained Anakin. After Luke's knighting ceremony, Yoda would call a council meeting where Luke would be in attendance, as he was the only hope towards defeating the Empire and the Sith. Only Obi-Wan, Plo Koon, and Yoda were in attendance in this council meeting. Yoda explains that the reason for this was because the rest of the council, while Obi-Wan was away on Moraband, had went to the planet of Mustafar and finally found Palpatine, but that they had all met brutal yet swift deaths, as did the soldiers that aided them. Yoda calls a mission to the planet of Malachor 5, where Palpatine was allegedly going next. Obi-Wan says that he and Luke can get a squad together and leave immediately, but Yoda explains that only Obi-Wan, Luke, Plo, and Yoda himself would be allowed to go. Yoda did not want any civilian casualties in the fight against the Sith, and so he decided to do everything he could to have the citizens stay out of this. So, Obi-Wan, Plo, Yoda, and Luke would prepare a ship to leave for Malachor 5. However, the four Jedi would be in for a very unfortunate surprise. Meanwhile, on Mustafar, Leia returns to her father, Emperor Vader, who had only grown more powerful during these nearly 2 decades of training, and she informs him of her battle against Obi-Wan. Vader scolds Leia for her failure to kill Obi-Wan. However, Vader says that they would soon get their chance to kill him. Vader says that he had killed most of the Jedi Council, and as they were attempting to communicate their position to Yoda, had successfully laid a trap for the Jedi on Malachor 5, and that Obi-Wan would surely be present when the quote-unquote location of Palpatine was discovered. So, Leia, Vader, Ezra, and Galen, who referred to himself as Starkiller, would leave in their ship for Malachor 5. The Jedi would be no more after this mission. When Yoda, Obi-Wan, Plo, and Luke reach Malachor 5, they find a Sith temple and look around. Eventually, they reach the top of the Sith temple, where they would find an ancient Sith superweapon capable of destroying any life all over the galaxy upon the command of the Sith Lord wielding it. They would find 4 hooded beings standing in front of the weapon, their backs turned towards the Jedi, and one of which the Jedi assumed was Palpatine. The Jedi would ignite their weapons, but the hooded figures turn around, revealing Vader, Starkiller, Ezra, and Leia. Obi-Wan is shocked to see his old student, and demands to know the location of Palpatine. Vader, since the Jedi would not leave here alive anyway, would tell them the truth, that he had killed Palpatine nearly 20 years ago after Padme had died to Sidious's blade, and took his place with Leia by his side. The Sith and their acolytes would then ignite their lightsabers when the Jedi were simply unable to move at this revelation, and an epic battle begins between the Force users. Ezra would go up against Plo, but Ezra would die early on, seeing as he did not have the experience that Plo had. Yoda would go up against Starkiller, and Yoda would gain the upper hand early on in the fight. But in the fight between Obi-Wan and Emperor Vader, Vader would be the one to gain the upper hand, as he was simply more powerful in this timeline. Luke would ultimately go up against Leia, with whom he sensed a very familiar connection. However, Luke is able to knock Leia out after she is suddenly distracted with Ezra's death. Plo would ultimately help Obi-Wan against Vader, but Vader, having surpassed both of them in power, would force push Obi-Wan away from the battle while using Force Lightning, before killing Plo in one flick of his wrist. Vader, having knocked Obi-Wan out, would resolve to fight Yoda, right as Yoda was able to kill Starkiller. The fight instantly turns in the favor of the Sith. But, just as Vader was about to deliver the killing blow to the Grand Master, he is suddenly pushed away from Yoda by use of the Force, in a way that was so powerful that he hadn't felt this kind of power since his fight with Palpatine. Vader looked to see who had pushed him, and Luke stood over him as he demanded to know just who this young boy was. Luke exclaims that he is a Jedi, like his father before him. Vader then attempts to use Force Lightning on the boy, the lightning tendrils being red, and Luke would block this with his weapon as Vader continued to fire. Vader would assess the boy's power, and he would see that the boy's potential was equal, potentially even more, than that of his daughter. Vader would stop his lightning barrage in favor of lightsaber combat in order to see Luke's skills with a lightsaber. Luke would ultimately surprise Vader and even almost defeat him. However, Vader decided to stop toying with him and pushed Luke backwards by use of the Force. Vader then attempted to use Force Lightning to shock the boy, but Obi-Wan, sensing the danger, leaps in front of Luke at the last second, and Obi-Wan is obliterated by Vader's lightning, sacrificing himself for his student the same way Qui-Gon had done for him. Luke would become enraged and attempt to attack Vader, who Luke still didn't know was his own father. But Yoda would push Luke away from the battlefield in order to take on Vader and yells for Luke to leave. Luke refuses, and the two Jedi would fight with Vader, but Vader subdues Luke early on. Yoda, shortly afterwards, would be outmatched, and he would cry one final time for Luke to leave the planet and report what had happened to the rest of the Jedi. Luke, finally seeing what Yoda was thinking, would attempt to do so, but Vader pulls Luke back by use of the Force, choking him in his hand as he lifted the boy up. Vader exclaims that he doesn't know who Luke is, but that he would figure it out, and that no Jedi would dare stand in his way, as he then kills Yoda. Luke is horrified at the deaths of Obi-Wan and Yoda and attempts to attack Vader again. But Vader would deflect this and lift Luke into the air as he's still choked. Leia would then get up as she would witness her father use the Sith superweapon to obliterate any remaining Jedi, but he commands it to keep Luke alive. The superweapon obeys Vader without question, and the entirety of the Jedi Order is eliminated within milliseconds, effectively making Luke the last of the Jedi, as Vader would then knock him out and take him prisoner aboard his ship, taking Leia with him. Vader would use the Force while flying back to Mustafar in order to determine the boy's identity, and to his utter surprise, he has a vision in the Force where Padme gave birth to twins, and one of the twins would grow up under Obi-Wan's tutelage. Vader would even get the boy's name, Luke Skywalker, and Vader deduces that this boy was in fact his own son, stolen from him by the Jedi in order to have some sort of secret advantage against him. However, what Vader didn't know was how well Luke had been trained. They would land on Mustafar, and Vader would ultimately pit his daughter against her brother in order to determine as to whether or not Leia would remain his apprentice. Luke is shocked upon the revelation that Leia is his sister, and Vader further reveals that he was Luke's father. Luke, stunned, would do absolutely nothing but question Yoda and Obi-Wan as to why he was not told of this. This gives Leia an advantage, and she attacks him. Leia does have an advantage over Luke, but with the revelation that he was her brother, she was conflicted. Luke senses this and attempts to appeal to the good inside of his sister. After about 5 minutes of this, Leia begins to hesitate as Luke's words were starting to affect her. Vader then has enough and shocks both of his children with Force lightning. It was at this moment that Vader would see the memory of Padme being killed by Sidious, and, seeing that he was now doing what he swore he never would, Anakin Skywalker would suddenly break free from Darth Vader and return to the light side. He would stop his use of Force lightning, and he would apologize profusely to his daughter for the harsh treatment that he had bestowed upon her throughout her life. And he would apologize to Luke as well for everything he had just done. After this happens, a fleet of Republic Venators emerge from hyperspace, and Luke reveals that he had secretly turned on a tracking device that led the Republic to their location. Luke would tell his family that they have to leave, but Anakin tells them, no, the twins have to leave. Leia asks what Anakin is talking about, and Anakin tells her that the Republic is planning an orbital bombardment and that they have to immediately leave the planet in order to survive. Luke asks what Anakin is going to do, and Anakin says that he is going to stay as the bombardment occurs as punishment for his crimes as Vader. Leia refutes this, knowing that Anakin would die. To this, Anakin simply says the words, "I know," before pushing both of his children away with the Force and shutting the door, locking it. The Skywalker twins, having no choice, would ultimately take Vader's ship and leave the planet as the bombardment begins, and Anakin, finally at peace knowing that he had protected his children as Padme would have wanted, dies on the fiery planet, having accepted his fate. With Anakin's death, the tide of the war is turned in favor of the Republic, and the Republic wins the Galactic Civil War on the planet of Serena. Mon Mothma, who is currently the Chancellor of the Republic, would allow Luke to rebuild the Jedi Order, and Leia would go off on her own into the galaxy, promising to visit Luke whenever she could, and finally ridding herself of the dark side, effectively destroying the Sith. Luke agrees, and he begins the long process of rebuilding the Jedi Order in the way that he felt Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Yoda would have wanted.